Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the I Am 1-2 podcast with your host, Christopher Cohn. With me is the one man I could not do any of this with, our producer, our good friend, the guy in the studio handling all the technical jazz, Dan the man over there aside the table from me. How you doing there, Dan?
I am doing fantastic. You said I couldn't do it with him.
Did I say that?
You couldn't do it without me.
You know what? It's psychological. I need to leave. Yeah, you're right. I don't like you. Freudian slip. Dan handles all the business with mixing and getting these podcasts uploaded and editing them. And you guys, please send Dan some comments in the comment section he's working way harder on this, man, and he's doing a great job, and I appreciate it tremendously because this would not happen without his help. So thank you again, Dan.
Yep, you're welcome, man. We're a pretty good team, I believe. You're good at doing that end, and I'm good at doing this end.
Funny how God put us together, isn't it?
Yep.
I love how that happens. If you're open, you never know who partners up with you in life and may help each parties get further down the road spiritually and or other ways. So we are in the season where Thanksgiving is staring down the barrel of us next week, and by the time you hear this, it might be past. But then we got the big one at Christmas time and New Year's. So just to touch for a second on that, we do have these great coping skills that help you navigate the holidays, and I just want to throw a couple of those out there so you can please be safe and take care of yourself in your recovery, no matter what you're recovering from. We all know that family and history gets triggered hard at holiday time. So like we talked about in group today, have an exit strategy always. Always have a way out, have a plan, have an excuse ready and loaded why you need to leave early or why you need to leave by a certain time. The other great suggestion is blame your sponsor, so that if they're mad at you for leaving the festivities because you don't care about your family, say, well, my sponsor told me I have to be here, otherwise they're not going to work with me. And if you get a good sponsor, they'll be happy to take that heat because the family never calls or says anything. Take your own car. Make sure you can get the hell out. Make sure you park your car where nobody boxes you in. And if you go with a partner, have a code word that you all can say to each other to get the hell out of there when shit starts to go down. Let's say your one relative's getting too drunk, the other relative's engaging in political arguments, and you know it's about to blow up. That's when you need to say sayonara. And you say to your partner the code word like Cheetos or a croissant or something you would not normally say in normal conversation, and you and your partner have already agreed when you say that word, you're out the door and gone. There's no discussion. Worst thing you want to do is not have that planned. And when you tell your partner you want to leave and they don't want to, they're like, well, why do you want to leave? I'm having a great time. And suddenly you're in a fight in the middle of everybody watching. That is not what you want. You have to have the agreement. We're not going to talk about why till we get in the car and we're out of there. And if you get triggered, honor yourself. Get the hell out. And then I think the most important tool during the holidays, because we get that FOMO from not being able to drink and drug, people always say, well, why are there more triggers around the holiday? I'm going to tell you why. There's a lot more drinking and drugging during the holidays. There's more money around, or at least people are spending money like drunken bandits because they're running up their credit cards. And so, we're like ants that have little antenna, and we can pick up when other people are using around us. I know I can. You could be 100 yards from me and I can tell if you're smoking dope. I can smell it, I can see it. And when other people are doing that, we feel left out, and then we feel resentful, and then we feel depressed, and before you know it, you could relapse. So I'm a big fan of the major tool, which is to have a treat lined up for yourself for your own holiday when you get home. Okay, you're done with the family obligations, you're done with all the group stuff, and you're going to leave and you're going to feel empty because that's normal for us. Screw that. Have something to look forward to. I'm going home to start that new video game I just downloaded. I'm going home to read that book I just got. I'm going home to watch that movie I already have rented. I've already got my snacks and my treats lined up about what I want, not what they served at Thanksgiving. And I had a guy in my group today that was going to be alone, and he was happy to be alone and just have snacks and watch the games. I said, dude, I've been in that position when I had to travel on business, and I just went to the store and bought my own Thanksgiving dinner of what I wanted. It wasn't turkey and gravy. It was what I wanted. And I said, I bought so much. I had it all over the table. It could have fed 10 people, and I could have ate off it for weeks. But it was what my spread was, and I did that for me. So that's part of recovery, is learning how to self-love and how to take care of yourself. And at the end of the day, it's just another day. It's a Thursday, but it's tradition, so it has all that baggage. But take care of yourself and don't feel gypped. Take care of yourself with some treats and do something nice for yourself so that you can come out of it and feel like, I had a pretty good holiday. It wasn't so great when I was with the family, but it was better later. All right, so talking about all of that, let's move forward on today's topic. This one's going to be a little bit deeper, so bear with me. I'm going to take a little sip, get ready here. This is non-alcoholic. I can't even imagine taking a drink after 40 years of recovery. I mean, that has the least interest. I might as well be licking the carpet for dust. That's how much interest taking a drink has in my life. And that's hope for you that if you're struggling out there, do these tools and the obsession will lift from you. So I talked about if these things run in order, sometimes they don't. In one of the podcasts, I talked about how I get to go to these trainings, and I have to do this for my licensure. I'm a licensed clinical alcohol and drug counselor here in the state of Kentucky. I've been in practice over 22 years, and I've been in recovery over 40 years myself. Grew up in an alcoholic family. I know a lot about this stuff. But you always have room for more, and there's always more being learned. And we're in a great time where scientific tools like MRIs and brain scans and PET scans and things like that, we're learning more about how the brain works. And then we're also just learning deeper levels of therapy that Freud couldn't have even imagined, nor would his brain been able to wrap his head around it, to be honest with you. I'm not saying he wasn't a genius, but I don't really follow his teachings. I'm more of a Carl Jung kind of guy. But I am amazed at how many trainings I go to, and I hear the latest developments of this deeper intensive trainings or deeper intensive therapies to help people with all sorts of issues, but obviously with alcohol and drugs, addiction, recovery from trauma, recovery from wounds. And it all, I repeat, it all goes back to childhood. And I've always said that, and I've always believed that, but I keep getting this validation from people who are doing real scientific evidence about the way the brain retains stuff and the way the brain will bring that up today and how that is triggered and your past keeps showing up today. And, you know, our ego just doesn't want to admit it. We want to say, I've got my stuff together. I'm fine. I'm not repeating patterns I had since I was 5 years old, because it's insulting, right? But you are, if other people are honest with you. So you've already seen the title card. You know, today we're going to talk about your inner child. And I know some of you might go, or some of you might say, that's stupid. Or some of you might be like, oh, which is good. We'll talk about your inner child. I was getting sober in the 1980s, started in 83 in my first experience in a treatment center in Minneapolis, Minnesota, which for whatever reasons was a mecca of treatment back in the 80s. Obviously, we had Hazelden up there, but there was a ton of great stuff being going on up there. I've been told through the evolution of addiction treatment that AA members in Minnesota, and as well as other places, but that was one of the meccas, wanted to bring the steps into treatment. And they were able to align that with the 28-day model, which we used to have. You used to get 28 days in intensive inpatient, and they would introduce you to the step work and get you busy on that. And for me, it worked. It was, I mean, it didn't work from the start, but I mean, it worked to give me an introduction about when I was ready. I knew where I needed to go, okay? And I remember hearing even these methodologies, approaches, ideologies about the inner child didn't really come about till maybe the later 80s in terms of the public mind, but I still kind of remember it being talked about in early recovery. And then it really blew up when this woman wrote this book about adult children of alcoholics. Her name is Janet Woltitz. Yes, that's her name. I'm not making it up. Janet Wolt, Woltitz. And, you know, and how the child being wounded is showing up in addiction, is showing up in behaviors today, what we call maladaptive coping strategies. We're going to talk about that today. And so one of the trainings I went to recently was on intensive inner child therapy, and it's based on science, which is really interesting that there's actually doing studies on how this part of you is there, and it's playing a role in your decision making and your emotions and your bad decision making. So we're going to get into that today, give you an overview and talk about it. Now, when I first was bringing that topic to other people's attention, there was a lot of blowback in AA. Now, I jokingly call it AA in the 80s, the dark ages, because, you know, it was run by a lot of crusty old timers, and some places it still is. They had not done their own healing work for their own inner child. They had not done their own family work. They had not done their own trauma work. And so since they were raging with resentment and pain, they would get absolutely livid if you would bring up feelings or bring up something a little frou-frou or new agey which was the term in the 80s, like inner child. You bring up inner child and you would get scoffed out of the room, man. It was dangerous. And I now know today that when I see that in people, and if you see that at meetings, those grumpy old timers, and it's a sign demonstrated if they're judging newcomers, if they're making fun of newcomers, if they're showing no love and tolerance, which is supposed to be our code, love and tolerance, I can almost damn well guarantee you my paycheck that man has not done his work on his childhood. He's still hurt. He's hurt by what his dad to him or whatever happened. It's not healed. And so he's just bile, just vomiting on other people. So get away from those people. First of all, they're toxic. Run away as fast as you can. And also realize if you're a newcomer, that's not the program. That's not what the program was ever meant to be, nor should it. Bill Wilson himself wrote in our big book, which these old timers will hit and say, this is everything I need to know. But it says there, the world has graced us with all sorts of doctors and ministers and practitioners of various varieties that we should take advantage of. Practitioners of various sorts. Can y'all imagine what that means? I can tell you what it meant to them. They were doing mediation seances. Bill Wilson, yeah, the guys in New York, they were doing seances to contact the dead to work on their spirituality because it was a time of New Age thought and there was a lot of new things being done and they were open. So yeah, don't come at me and tell me what's not allowed or what is allowed because our founder said everything is available to you. So why are we talking about inner child? Because I myself as a therapist see this as a major obstacle and it shows up and it's not being identified for what it is when it is showing up. And so we will say things about a newcomer who keeps relapsing like, well, I guess they don't want it, or I guess they're just stubborn, or they won't surrender. And I hear us throw those terms out without really looking deeper to see, now, wait a minute, man. I think it's a cycle of trauma showing up to cause them to relapse. I think it's the inner child being triggered and causing the relapse, and I'll explain why in a second. And so just to expand your mind on that, let's not just jump to judgments like, well, they don't want it or they're not serious. And it's like, maybe they are, but maybe they're dealing with more than meets the eye. So the inner child is this part of you that is part of you, okay? It's deep down inside. It's not a made-up thing. It's this thing that's part of your time in the past that got stuck in time, got wounded, and it's never been dealt with. It's never been healed, okay? And that child is still pissed about it. That child is still hurt over it. And, you know, who wants to deal with that, especially if you're a man? I'm not going to take time to feel my feelings and deal with my child. So we just ignore it. We ignore it and we sweep it under the rug. So let me give you some qualities that the inner child has that happens to this little kid inside of us, your little guy, your little gal. The inner child is trapped in a time warp, meaning that it's frozen in time from the moment of that trauma or that wound when it took place, all right? It hasn't been able to move past because we have not done the work to attend to it, to heal it. And usually there are not people around you to help attend to it and heal it in a healthy way. The inner child is activated by core triggers. Core triggers we'll talk about in a moment, a few different ones, but they're just on a basis of feelings only. It's not from your adult mind. It's not an adult mind that's sitting here trying to analyze and say, well, I think I feel this because of this. That's not who the child is. The child has no ability to do that. The child just feels pain. That's all it knows is the pain of it, and it wants relief. It runs on raw emotions, just like I said. It doesn't know reason. It just knows raw emotions. The inner child will correlate current negative events with what it went through in the past. So, if you go through a stressor or a trigger today, which is not like the trauma, the child will actually be right there to pull out from its closet. It's got like an attic of all these storage of all these things that happened to it. And it'll look at what's happening to you and go by the feelings. So if the feeling's anxiety or fear, it'll grab something and say, that's like this. And when it does that and says, that's like this, it brings all that baggage. So now the trigger that's happening to you at the moment has just been amplified. It's just gone from a 2 to a 10, and you won't even realize why. Your response will be the body first, because that's what trauma and anxiety does. It'll elevate your pulse rate, your heart rate, your breathing, and your cortisol levels will go out of control. Your adrenaline will rise. Your I always say it wrong, neoprenephrine, all that stuff for the fight or flight gets kicked in gear. And you don't realize, because you'll be sitting there going, wait a minute, why am I overreacting? This is not that big a deal. It's just my boss. And I'm getting fearful he's going to fire me, but he's not. But the child has pulled that out and added that to the weight. So again, the child correlates the current events with those from the past by comparing them. It's ready. It's right there to say, and why? Because it's trying to protect itself. Its main mission is, I must not get hurt again. So it's going to say, be careful, that's like this, be careful, don't do that. And usually it's incorrect. We don't know that. We think our feelings are valid, and we will go with it as if it's gospel truth. But the child's incorrect, because what's happening now is not actually what happened back then. And you have to challenge that. We'll talk about that in the tools section. The child refuses to deal with any emotional distress. Ever seen a child want what they want? I showed a funny video at the end of group, as I always do to leave group with a smile on our face. I always show them a 1-minute funny video. And it was about these emotional kids. And they were talking toddlers. And they were like throwing fits about not getting the snack or whatever. They do not want to deal with any emotional stress. They'll just let it out, and they won't tolerate it. They don't feel comfortable with it. They don't have the ability, the patience to be able to attend to their stress. They just want relief. And its only goal is to seek comfort. Okay, so it's not going to tolerate the distress. I must seek comfort. I must seek something to comfort me, which for an addict or an alcoholic, what does that mean? I'm probably going to run to my drugs and alcohol. All right, so this is all in your subconscious mind. Your inner child is not a separate individual from who you are. It's not some form of schizophrenia. It's not some sort of dissociative identity disorder, because you'll think, well, I'm hearing voices in my head. Am I sick? Am I crazy? No, it's just part of you that's being activated. That's the past part of you being brought in the present, as we said. But it's in your subconscious, and that's what you need to realize. You won't be aware this is happening unless you've learned these tools, and you'll be able to stop and say, oh, wait a minute, maybe this is triggering my inner child, and that's why I'm overreacting. So we'll get to that in a second. So this part of you, this part of your psyche, will retain these emotions as they were experienced in childhood. If they've not been felt, if they've not been processed and dealt with, they'll be just as powerful then, today, as they were back then when you feel them, because they've not gone anywhere. It will retain those emotions as they were experienced in childhood. Most people are unaware of their inner child, and it's always activated by current negative events. So pretty much as you're going through your day, if you get anything that's stressing you out or negative, is a potential that you could be activating your history, and your child will be ready right there to be like, this is like this, this is like this, okay? There's a lack of an awareness, and because of this lack of awareness that this is the child adding more weight and that is not what is really happening, that will lead to behavioral, emotional, and relationship difficulties. In other words, your thinking is going to be screwed up and you're going to make bad choices. I see this all the time in group. People will come in and say, I'll say, why'd you relapse? I don't know. The weather was bad. I was feeling down. And then what happened? I don't know. It overwhelmed me. I had to go get a drink. And I'm like, wait a minute. We went from bad weather to getting a drink. What happened? You see what we're saying here? The child added the extra load. I couldn't think clearly. I couldn't feel clearly. I didn't know what was going on. And I made a bad decision. It results in bad choice making, bad maladaptive behaviors. So we got to connect this understanding of why we're feeling this way and why we're engaging in the negative behaviors, and separate what's happening today from what's happening in the past. And that's going to have to be a dialogue with this child. Begin to talk to it. Begin to be aware of it. And we'll get into that in a second. There was one other thing I wanted to talk about, and these are the cards. I picked the choice ones from the training. It's about maladaptive. Oh, I know what it is. It's back here. It's about maladaptive behaviors and how these things show up. So when the child is in distress, over years, it has to develop coping strategies to deal with that pain. And if the child doesn't want to have any pain, remember, it doesn't want to feel any distress, it doesn't want to feel any pain, these adaptive coping strategies will be bad ones. That's what the word maladaptive means. They're maladaptive coping strategies. And here's a short list, and I'm sure you can relate to many of these if you're watching this podcast. Maladaptive coping strategies can include self-harm. They can include social isolation, so you just pull away and you just close the curtains and isolate from everybody. Procrastination, I'm just not going to deal with it. I won't go to work today. I don't want to deal with that. Impulsive behaviors, that would be drinking and drugging and doing things I know are not healthy for me. Overworking, just to avoid it. Let's just stay busy. Avoidance, denial, at any cost. I must not look at that. Cognitive distortions, meaning their thinking will be all screwed up. I'll walk this through with patients. I'm like, dude, you're just not thinking this straight. You've been all confused by all the emotions that are bombarding you. Reckless behaviors, taking risks. Aggression, just getting mad, maybe pounding somebody in a bar. Emotional eating, how prevalent is that in our culture? Just look around. Neediness, and then, of course, addictive substances and behaviors. Behaviors of all kinds for addictions, right? So that's the danger. If this child is not dealt with and we're not aware of it, we may be repeating patterns and bad habits that are continually setting us back, setting me back to treatment, or setting me back in my diet, or setting me back in my progress with my physical health or with my relationships. And I keep blowing up in bad relationships, but I don't realize it's the history that's causing that, not so much what's happening in the present moment. Again, I know these are fairly complex concepts, and I'm trying to break them down as simple as possible while giving you the basics. This was an 8-hour training, folks. So by the end of the day, my brain was jello. But all you need to know right now is that it's you, it's part of you, it's frozen in time, it doesn't have any reason, it just feels raw emotion, and it doesn't want to hurt. It just wants to seek comfort, and then that's driving the bus to run and do something maladaptive or bad. That's not a good coping skill for your boss just giving you some words, and it's making it bigger than it really is. All right, so what caused these kinds of wounds in children in childhood? And I love this picture. There's a picture on the slide of a teddy bear doing this. This poor thing's hurt, right? But throughout a child's life, they're, like I said, they're like sponges. I've said this in other podcasts, and they don't have the ability to analyze why things are happening the way they're happening. They don't have the experience level. They don't have the brain development yet. So they're just a raw sponge feeling all this stuff. So imagine some of these things impacting a child as they're growing up. Things like negative words. I do a lot of times with patients who were told a negative phrase or a negative label when they were growing up about themselves. And it may be an innocent, maybe the family's just joking, maybe they didn't mean it that serious, but it was negative and it impacted them for a long time. Lack of affirmation. How many of us growing up in dysfunctional families did not get the appropriate, you're good, you're okay, we love you? It's not based on what you do. It's based on just you being you. You're okay just being you. We love you to death. We excel at that at meetings. At least we try to here in Louisville. We've got a great recovery community. We try to excel and let the newcomer know we welcome you. We love you. Get up and talk. We want you to be here. Lack of affirmation. Lack of attention. Again, if there's dysfunction in the family, the dysfunction is going to draw the focus, and the poor child's not going to get the attention it needs. Abuse, of course, needs no explanation. Abandonment, that can be emotional abandonment too. If my parent is busy taking care of an alcoholic parent, they're not available to me emotionally. Their emotions are getting sucked up by the disease and by the crisis that's happening. Enmeshment, lack of boundaries. We're all caught up with each other, and I don't know where I stop and you begin. Tragic events, of course. Dad loses his job, we get kicked out of the house, things like that. And poor role models. Now, these are just a few. He asked us to name others, and people went on forever of all these events and impacts on children that we don't even think about today, do you? Even as you're listening to this, you're not even thinking like as an adult, oh, well, that's just life, and that's just what you have to do. The world sucks. We all have to deal with that. But think about your child going through that. That picture we ask you to get in early recovery in the groups we go to find that picture of you when you were happy, joyous, and free. And think about that poor kid going through those challenges. And as Gabor Mate says about trauma, it's the event is traumatic, but it's the after effects that leaves the trauma with you. So if the child was not cared for after the thing happens, nobody explained to it what was going on, nobody attended to it because they were too busy being distracted or they emotionally unavailable, well, that child was never given the support it needed, okay? And that's the damage. It's the damage of the events, but then it's the damage of no one's there to comfort, nurture, and explain. Think about those words for your own childhood growing up. Who was there to nurture, comfort, and explain? I had a patient just today talk about the fact that their father had to work out of town a lot. He's just not there. It wasn't his fault. He was supporting the family. He's trying to help the family survive. He's doing a good job as a father, but he's not there to comfort, nurture, and explain. That one's in capital letters. Explain why this is happening, and the details the child's mind just can't figure out. The coping strategy is always, I just won't deal with it. I just won't think about it. And this is what we see people die from in the program. We see people die from not dealing with their stuff, not feeling their feelings, not willing to face the things that happen to them. I'll get people in group, and if you even go there, I'll even mention I've made this mistake before, where the day before I'll say, tomorrow we're going to talk about trauma, and people don't show up. We're talking major shutdown then. You're not even willing to hear some education about it. But again, must avoid it at all costs, right? All right, so how is this helping us or hurting us in today's recovery environment? So I say you got the newcomer. He's not even aware his inner child's being activated. How is this impacting him and what to look for? Because there's 3 areas it impacts. It impacts your thinking, it impacts your emotions, and it actually influences your behaviors. Okay, so let's talk first about your thinking. When you're upping those emotions and the child is saying that is like this, you're overwhelmed, so it will keep you from using your rational thinking skills. So again, we're blaming the newcomer and we're saying, well, you're just not serious and you just won't surrender and that's why you keep relapsing. And no, he's not able to think rationally. All he knows is fight or flight. I must get out of here. I must get safety. I must get comfort. That's being driven by those wounds. It tends to make us doubtful, so you will second guess yourself all the time. Oh, is this right? Should I do this? I'm not sure. Maybe I should do that. We're going to have struggles to trust others. How many of us came into recovery and said, I don't trust people, and had a hard time opening up and trusting a sponsor? We'll be hypersensitive to criticism. If you're a sponsor, you've seen this, where you're trying to support your guy by giving him feedback, but he takes it wrong. And he gets his feelings hurt, and he almost pouts. And you're like, dude, what's that all about? That is him going, that is like this. That's like the time my dad put me down. And they will do that stuff to you. Just by proximity, they tend to put you as a sponsor position in the position of father, mother, authority figure, things like that. And it influences their thinking that they're more likely to focus on the worry thoughts, the thoughts of fear, the thoughts of, I got to think about this, I got to worry about that. Because again, remember, it's a defenseless child. It's vulnerable. So it'll focus on the negative. That's how it affects your thinking. It affects our emotions because of that raw emotion stuff. It doesn't make much sense. Okay, it's just fear. Fear is the primary emotional state when this stuff is stirred up. That's the primary. And then underneath that says it's followed by sadness. And this escalates our anxiety. It drives our low self-worth. And then we become highly reactive. Why not? If I'm sensitive, I'm going to be highly reactive. Let's use another example. If I've got a bad case of the flu and someone's acting like a jerk, I'm probably going to be really mean to them because I don't feel good. So I'll be highly reactive. Because again, the child's primary desire is to get that comfort. I must get safety. I must feel better. I must do something. And then worst of all, it affects our behaviors. We have this inability to sit still with that emotional discomfort, so we will seek any distraction available. Comfort, pleasure, distractions, must get busy, must do something, must not sit still with this. I got to go. I got to get busy. We will blame others. We won't take responsibility for our own. We'll blame others for it, and we won't ponder our consequences when we act out. That's the scariest thing about being overwhelmed by your emotions. We know this well from relapse triggers. When you're in your emotions, you don't have the ability to think straight. You can't think about the consequences. All you're thinking about is the comfort and the pleasure you'll get. If I just get that booze, I just get that McDonald's, I just get whatever. Okay? So it's pretty powerful stuff, as you can see. And again, as adults, we like to sort of say, well, that doesn't affect me, blah, blah, blah. But I have to tell you, as a therapist and as a sponsor for 40 years, I see this play out time and time again in people. And I think it's an underappreciated aspect to say, okay, let me look at my newcomer as if he's a little 5-year-old. And let me look at his little kid inside and how that's being triggered by what's happening, because that's what's going on there. Okay? All right, so there are core emotional triggers for the child. These are the things that it will feel to really activate it. You got to be careful about being exposed to these things. So these are, and I can relate to a lot of these from growing up in my alcoholic family system, especially the first one. It says, I've been criticized. I was overly criticized by my father. He was hypercritical of me, and so it put me on alert to criticism in general, and especially being accused of something I didn't do. That's a hot button. You'll bring out the worst in me. So that's a core emotional trigger for my little kid. I feel stress. Again, another trigger for the child. I don't matter, like I'm devalued. Nobody's listening to me. Nobody's paying attention to me. I'm alone. Nobody cares. I'll tell you, people will commit suicide on that one. I'm useless. I'm no good. I've been falsely accused. There you go. It's on the list. I'm invisible, or I'm jealous and envious of others. I feel inadequate. I'm not worthy. Nobody really cares about me. I've been rejected. I'm not safe. I feel helpless. I'm in trouble. Now, these are core emotional, and you will notice about these, there's not a long description. It's just a core response of the child. That's what they'll feel. I'm helpless. I'm in trouble. We got to do something. And again, the trigger today doesn't really validate that, but that's what happens is it gets mixed up. So what do we do about all this stuff? How do we deal with this inner child when it's activated? Well, I think, first off, you got to sort of listen, and you got to just be aware it's there and start to pay attention. This is hard for me even with all the time I have in sobriety. I was thinking about this over the weekend, like, okay, well, what do I really do to attend to my child? I mean, I do fun things. I play video games, and I let him recreate, and I have fun, and I have that balance in my recovery where I let my little kid out and just, let him be just a kid, right? And just be goofy. And I do laugh, and I just pulled that prank at my group with the fart shit recently, and that was letting the little kid out a little bit. And again, I see a lot of people not understand that or look at you weird when you do that, but I think that's important is to first start a dialogue and just to say, okay, you're there. What do you need? I'm here for you as an adult now. I can actually take care of my little kid. So what can I do for you? I had a therapist a long time ago who told me to work on my inner child stuff by going to the toy store and picking out the one stuffed animal your kid wants. And I thought it was a stupid idea, but I was also intrigued. And then when you got intrigued, maybe I usually going to do it. And I went to Toys R Us when they actually still had stores back then. And of course, what he wanted was the biggest gorilla on the shelf. Thank God it wasn't the gigantic one, but it was a pretty big one. It's kind of expensive for a newcomer. But I got it, and, just did what my therapist told me to do. Hold it close, use it to talk to your kid, and just let that side of you out a little bit. I will tell you this much. If you don't pay any attention to what I'm talking about today, and you think it's all goofball shit, which is fine, it's going to undercut you. You think it's something else undercutting you on triggers? I'm telling you, this is the core thing. This part of you that's being overactivated, over-emotional, not being able to think straight. And then next time you have somebody come back to your meeting and they're talking about their relapse, listen how they weren't thinking straight. Listen how they just didn't care, and they'll talk about pressing the F it button. I don't care, just don't drink. That sounds like a little kid having a fit, doesn't it? So, first off, know your core emotional triggers. As I just said, my family work, and I've done a lot of it, I've learned those triggers about hypercriticism. I've learned those triggers about loud voices. I don't like loud voices. I tolerate them, and I can get loud myself, and I'll argue right down to the death with you. But I've learned I don't really like it. It leaves me with this hangover afterwards, and strong emotions, too. It leaves me with this uncomfortable, like, afterwards, I don't like it. Loud noises in general, I don't like. I like to have a calm, quiet environment in my home space. And as you're dialoguing with your child and you're getting to know these core emotional triggers, you as an adult can make adjustments in your environment that are more conducive to that child feeling comfortable, that child being not activated. So, again, when we're talking about those core triggers, I won't go over all of them, but just to be clear about what we're talking about. Sorry. Got some like papers here. I've been rejected. I feel stress. I'm alone. Nobody cares. I'm useless. I'm jealous. I feel inadequate. I'm insignificant. I'm not safe. I've been criticized. I don't matter. Try to listen for those voices from the little kid. Like, what's going on? Why are you so upset? Same thing as if your child, if you had a 4 or 5-year-old and they came in your bedroom at night crying, I hope you wouldn't kick them in the ass and say, deal with it. But that's what we tend to do as adults. It's the most bizarre thing. We aren't very kind to ourselves. So at least start to be kind to it, start the dialogue, and start listening like, well, what are the core triggers? What does set you off? Okay, so that's number 1. Number 2, be mindful of these negative events. Be mindful of the fact that when they happen, I've got to separate. Is this real or is this real? Or is my child just adding more weight onto it? So when it says be mindful of the negative events, mindfulness is a very important aspect of all recovery, because I've got to be aware of my environment and whether I'm around triggers and what's safe and what's not safe. But just being aware that, all right, my boss got on my nerves, I'm probably a little touchy, let me go take care of myself before the child has an ability to jump in and take over. Try to process your inner child's emotional distress with your safe supports. This is a real hard one. I will tell you, especially for us men. I don't know if we really do talk that much, except maybe on retreat when Dan's doing some of his exercises, where we do really open up and talk about how we feel on that core level, scared, not adequate, not measuring up. All that shit that as far as I've worked with every man has this stuff, but it's buried deep, and we would never admit it to each other. So again, process these inner child's emotional distress and see if you can talk to your sponsor and say, my kid was feeling really upset today, and that's what happened, and blah, blah, blah. And it's going to sound goofy, I know, but like every new behavior, it's one of those things we judge it first and say it's goofy, and then we do it and say, that worked out great, that was awesome. Employ what I feel versus what is real. So when you're mindful of that negative event and you're hearing your child coming along saying, okay, this is like this, I've got to work as an adult to separate those and be mindful. This is what's real. This is what I feel. Now, you catch me on that? Because you will hear people say, it is real because I'm feeling it. And what do we say in meetings? Feelings are not facts. Anybody heard that at a meeting? Feelings are not facts. That's what they're saying. This is real. My boss is getting on me. This is feel. This is how it feels to my little kid from the past for being criticized. Okay? And then try to make the right choice. And I usually find that you're going to need a sponsor or a support to make the right choice if you'll reach out and call. That's not always easy for us to do too. So if I'm about to slip and do some unhealthy behaviors, if I'll call my sponsor and tell on myself and then say, order me to go to a meeting or order me not to go over there with her, whatever that unhealthy behavior is, that's usually the best thing for a new person. I've got to have somebody else's power to do that. I don't have the ability to stop myself. So one more time, know your core emotional triggers, get to listen and talk to your child. Be mindful of these negative events to not trigger your child, so you're kind of the protector trying to keep the child out of trouble. Same thing as if you had a real child, protecting it from danger. Process your child's emotional distress. Don't ignore it. If you ignore it, it tends to grow and get worse. They'll just get louder, and it will take over you, and then you'll relapse. You've got to start listening. What do you need? Do you need to relax? Do you need a hug? Do you need somebody to tell you you're okay? Well, I'm here for you. Employ what I feel versus what is real. This is real. This is what I feel. And then try to make the right choices by using your supports. The great thing about this therapy that I thought was so fascinating is that I do find the people that make the most progress in recovery are the most in touch with their feelings and with their core issues. You'll notice them because they seem more sensitive in the way they're able to talk, right? Like I'll run up against some people in recovery and they're talking broad and you can tell their walls are up and it's sort of bark almost. And then these other people are like our friend Darren Frank. Let's just use him as an example. He's a great friend of ours, and everybody always talks about how great Darren is. Well, he's done a lot of emotional and spiritual work so that he's very comfortable sharing those sides of himself and being open with that stuff. So that will enrich your recovery to be able to do that, and it will keep you from triggers, just being aware that this is a factor. All right, so where is there issues and pitfalls with this? And then we'll talk to Dan about it and see if we can flesh this out a little bit. Well, in the research, because again, there's people doing this therapy, and it's long-term therapy with a one-on-one therapist, and I'm not licensed and qualified to do it. You have to go through some pretty severe training to do this because it's a long-term therapy. They have found that clients who are 70 years or older have a harder time trying to get in touch with their child. They're not quite sure why that is. It could be multiple things. It could be resistance, or it could just be old school, or it could be that they just don't remember their memories. And that was another thing they said was a pitfall, is lack of childhood memories. I run into a lot of people in recovery that say, I don't really remember this. I have a black spot for my childhood. I usually tend to lean to feel like that's something bad. If you can't remember, it's probably something bad. But in general, we do have a lot of buried emotions. And remember, we've used a lot of chemicals, so all of our brain cells are not operating. The inability to share emotions. There are some people who just aren't willing to go there, and they just don't have the skills to go there with emotions, and that's okay. But with a good sponsor, good guide, maybe they can help you make some progress with that. Even if it's journaling, like, I don't know what my kids feel, but I'll try to write about it, and then take that to your sponsor and talk about it. Here's a big one. Guilt over looking at our parents' faults or over feeling like we're blaming them. I run into this all the time in family work, and I try to tell my patients right off the bat, we're not doing this to find fault, and we're not doing this to blame people. That will get you nowhere in your recovery. We're doing this to find your truth. So your mom or dad might have done this, but what we're getting at is, how did you feel in that situation? What was your truth? What was your experience in that situation? Okay? There's a little bit of a pitfall that people will think they had a perfect childhood. I heard somebody say that today. It's like, I don't know, man, my childhood was pretty good. Now, every time I hear that, I'm like, okay. There's no such thing as a perfect childhood. That's number one. And number two, granted, you might have had a good childhood, but I think you might be overlooking some things that I hope to God your sponsor helps you find them on the 4-step. Because, again, they could undermine your recovery if you're not being honest with this idea that, I don't know, I pretty much had a perfect childhood. And that's about it. But again, this was a deeper dive today, and I'll take any questions if y'all submit them in the email. And again, some of this information was new to me, building on what I knew before. But I get excited when I get exposed to new tools, and it makes my brain start to think like, okay, well, how could I use that? How could I share that? That's the first thing I want to do, is share it. I knew I wanted to come in here and share some of this with you. Because like I said, I started in the 80s, and we were talking about inner child, but we didn't really understand it, and everybody made fun of it. And now I'm seeing, oh my God, there's real science behind this. This is how our brains work. And again, the main concept is the child has raw emotion, doesn't think, and says, this is this, and brings all that crap into the day, and you're triggered before you realize what's happening. So you've been an objective sort of lab rat with me listening to all this, Dan. And so give me an idea if I made any sense at all, because like I say, it was deep and there's a lot of information to share. And I hope I didn't overwhelm anybody out there and just intrigued you to think about some different things. So any questions or responses you think?
Well, I'll say, I don't know that I knew what the inner child was until I just sit here and listen to what I've heard it tossed around, and I've heard, it be talked about, but not at that level of thinking about how it's, much like the way we talk about when we talk about the disease of alcoholism, and I'll say that it operates like a parasite or like a computer virus. Your inner child kind of does that. It hijacks you. What I think I'm hearing,
Absolutely.
And so you're not again. I think I'm doing Dan, but really not. There's this thing behind me doing Dan, and I think it's me. That's one of the things they say about that alcoholism wants to make you think it's him. That's who you are.
Yeah.
Very, very interesting. I think back to, and I can say I didn't have a bad childhood. But I had some events that rocked me here, there, and another place, and another place, and another place that I never knew how to process. And I come in here like that with that wound in there, and completely dumb to it, until you go through and process this stuff, and then can see the patterns and know when my emotions get when something triggers me above normal, right? What is it what is that? That's not really, I shouldn't be having this reaction, this strong a reaction to that. And to be able to look back and see, oh yeah, it's this, that relating this to that.
And what's cool about it is you can build on that work. So once you get some awarenesses, it's easier to identify when you're being triggered.
Yeah, just like it's progressive. You can roll that and get momentum in that thing. You know what? I don't know. I can't help but think about it again because of this dog thing. that I have kind of denied for years, that I am afraid of dogs. I'm afraid of dogs I don't know. That's and maybe that's smart to some level, but no, it's an elevated fear. I shouldn't be that afraid. And I was triggered a month ago or something, going to a client's house, and I went back over there today, and they weren't there. And they just told me to go in, and those dogs were in there.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, and I was sitting there doing it again today, man. I was sitting there thinking, golly, these dogs are not, one of them was barking, and that was kind of making, that was the biggest problem. If that had shut up, it'd have been all right. But that barking dog had me elevated. I want everything in my mind wanted to shoot out the door. And I was there to get a piece of door casing off. I need to get this little piece of this job over. I can't just run off. But those emotions that popped up just today.
And I'll bet you felt that in your body, that fight or flight.
I'm still feeling it like today. It rocked my day from there forward.
When you were describing that, I had this picture like Hollywood, where you'd walk through a room as adult Dan, and then you come past the doorway and it clicks, and suddenly you're this little kid walking through there. And that's a great way to look at it when you're responding. Stop trying to think about it from your adult mind to analyze it, but more go from the feelings. And that little kid was like, I'm going to be bit like I was before. We need to get the hell out of here, right?
Yep, that's exactly it, man. And it does. It had its toll on me today. I could feel that.
You know what's really cool about this work is if you can bring this work into your relationship, and both partners are on a more advanced level of working on themselves, you can really open up and get an intimacy level going on something that you've never had with another human being in your life.
Yeah. Being
able to be vulnerable to that level and really talk about, well, my little kid was afraid he was going to get bit by the dog and blah, blah, blah. What, are you going to do a bar and share that with some stranger? He's going to go, get over it. That dog's not going to hurt you. Put your hand in there. Let it get over it. It's like, this is how we deal with our feelings in America.
And that's what the dog owner was doing to me too, which I wondered
really?
about, just thinking about that, about how he wasn't doing that. He wasn't saying, but he was degrading me for being afraid of his dogs. I talked to him on the phone. He said, "Oh yeah, I forgot you don't." He said that. "Oh, I forgot you're afraid of dogs." "I'm sorry, man." He said, "I promise they won't hurt you." And
two triggers, motherfucker.
Yeah,
he said, "You're afraid of dogs. How dare you impugn me as a man, you motherfucker? I'm not going to work for you." And what was the second thing he said? You're afraid of dogs.
And he said, "Those dogs are not going to hurt you."
Those dogs are not going to hurt you. That's a false message. You've already been bitten.
Yeah.
Insanity, right? But that is how we deal with this little kid.
Yep. I didn't even think about the fact that he triggered me too. I was thinking it was just the dogs.
Absolutely.
Until he was talking about that.
And the saddest thing to me as a therapist is I'll watch my patients trigger themselves because they'll shit on their little kid. They'll try to beat up the little kid for feeling that way, or they'll criticize themselves. They'll beat themselves up. They'll say, I shouldn't feel that way. I shouldn't be that. Instead of opening up that dialogue and saying, why do you feel that way? What's going on? Talk to me. I'm still, this is the coolest thing, guys. You can be 40 years recovered like I am and still have these awarenesses of shit from my childhood that are coming up even recently. And again, going to these trainings helps because it brings up those brain cells. You're not thinking about stuff. But there's actually just one was occurring to me when we were talking now. I don't want to bring it up right at the moment, but I was just like, wow, even that is powerful that it's bringing it up now. Then I'm thinking about, that's why I don't like this. Okay, I don't like this because it reminds me of that, and then this happened in the past, and I want to say that, maybe I'm not a big fan of being closed in. Anybody that knows me knows that. I don't like, I can deal with small spaces, don't get me wrong. I have no problem going down in a cave, whatever. I get a little freaked out in the Mammoth Cave when you're going past those rocks like this and you're thinking if the earth shifts, you're going to be crushed. That's different. But in general, I just don't like being boxed in and feeling like, smothered kind of deal. And even on the highway, man, if some motherfucker is pacing a truck and I'm stuck over here in this lane and that truck throws a tire through my windshield, I'm a dead motherfucker. So I will do what I can to get out of that boxed in thing. Just don't box me in, man. And so I want to say, that's a past life deal. Maybe you got buried alive and that's why you're claustrophobic and shit. It's like, no, it's not that. I can actually find some things from my childhood that have to do with smothering that I can, or just give me my space. Give me my space. That's the message my little kid's saying. Give me my space. And so you see what I did there? Had a little dialogue. He gave me what he wanted to say. That's what he wanted to say. Give me my space. And you know me pretty well. You know I'm a guy that has to have his space. Yep. So as an adult, I take care of that part of me today. I set boundaries and stuff with that stuff. So again, this is great advanced level, next level stuff that it's based on how deep you want to go into it. And YouTube and the internet is a great resource. Start looking up inner child. But I really appreciate what you said, Dan, about not really understanding even what it was before. So I hope even that, to introduce the topic, was helpful for people.
Yep, that was a way I had not thought about it at all. Super cool too that I get to be the recipient of these teachings and learnings. I love sitting at this side of the table and absorbing this stuff. I did it again. We have a little thing we do while we tape, and I let it run over because I was focused in listening to you, and I looked down and my timer was up and it was already started a new clip, and I'll just have to deal with that. It causes me a little bit of an editing problem.
So those at home, 1 minute we'll be doing this, then we'll be doing that. It's okay. It'll just be a clip in the action.
Yeah. Well, they really won't even notice.
But I do like the aspect of the information today, and I want to emphasize, to wrap it up, that the child not being attended to, nobody was there to nurture, nobody was there to explain. So did you have people respond to your dog wound with compassion and care?
I don't recall. I mean, my mom was pretty caring, and she was a nurse and all that, so I can't imagine that I got...
Right, she took care of you.
That I would have to believe that I was taken care of, yeah. But, one of the things was, like, I just thought about it, like, there never was, like, any justice for it, right? There's dog hurts a kid, something ought to freaking happen. Mm-hmm. And then that just come across to me about, like, never
wow. There's your little kid talking. Where's the justice?
Yeah, where's the justice?
I like that.
Because one of the dogs has still lived in the damn neighborhood, and I was living here, so I've been bit by this dog once, and I'm forced to go outside and having to potentially run into this dog again.
Son of a bitch. He's roaming the land like a wolf.
And nobody gave two shakes about it.
But again, we can do that today for ourselves, to start to attend to those messages and those things that are bothering us. Again, it's funny that just so much is coming up because I'm talking about this stuff with people.
Yep. It's clucking off quite a few things for me.
So please, for yourself at home, don't get overwhelmed by the information and the volume that I threw at you today. I just want to give you every angle on this deal. It's really just to sum up, okay? A good summary helps for us. I'm an adult. I'm in the present moment. A trigger happens. It activates my core wounds. My core wounds is my little kid going to the attic, the storage room, and taking something out and saying, this is what it feels like. Okay? It doesn't have any sense. It might have no basis for relating to what's happening in the present moment, but it feels like it. So now I've got two weights. I've got the weight of what's happening now. I got the weight of the past. And so I got to be able to deal with both. First to separate, okay, let me deal with the balls and get him out of here so he doesn't see me cry like a baby. And then let me take some time, if I can't now, later, and find out what happened. What was triggering you there? What was going on? And to me, that's really the funnest part of recovery, is to go on that adventure of finding out who you are. Those are deep level things you're talking about, I'm talking about who you fundamentally are, right? We can project our image all we want, wear the right clothes, drive the right car, date the right woman, and have that image out there. That's not who you are. Underneath, Dan is a kid that got hurt by a dog, and that's still very real and very present for you. And the after effects, I think, is so important. When it said, like, where's the justice if nothing was done about it? How many times do we hear that about abuse victims? Mm-hmm. That if nothing's done about it, they feel doubly traumatized. So please, at least folks at home, don't doubly traumatize yourself by pouring alcohol down the kid's throat. I say this jokingly, but it's not a joke. Our little kid speaks up and says, I need something, and we will put our boot on its neck and make it smoke a pipe. That's how much we care about our little kid. So if nothing else, I hope that opened up your compassionate heart to just be there. Listen a little bit. Journal. Take some walks. Listen to what it's telling you. It won't steer you wrong. It's trying to help you heal. It wants you to come back and save it and heal it. So let's do that. Let's get on our own side with it. Any last thoughts on that, Mr. Dan? Kind of beat it to death, but I hope it was helpful for folks. And again, we'll try to bring up all different topics here, but and I'll stretch us every now and then. I even stretched myself because I wasn't sure I was going to be able to cover this in any adequate way, so I hope it worked. All right, now we're going to shift to our question and answer period where you, the folks at home, get to send us your questions, and we will give you real-world advice from our experience and try to help you have a better life. So send your questions to iam12recovery@gmail.com. That's our home place, iam12recovery@gmail.com. And we would love to hear from you, even if it's questions, comments, whatever. Please reach out and let us know you're listening and what's going on. All righty. Today we have 2 quick letters for you. I think you'll get a lot out of these. And again, we appreciate your responses, and it helps us out to help others. All right. Hey, Chris and Dan. Hey, back at you. Here's a question that's been tumbling around in my head for a while. Okay, good. Say a person is sober and gets a diagnosis for depression, ADHD, anxiety, etc. If they are prescribed something for their issues and they take it as prescribed, would they still be considered sober in the eyes of AA and fellow members of AA? Thanks very much for the help, and keep on rocking. Thanks, you guys. I appreciate that. All righty. So could pick the angle I want to take on this. We have great literature in the program, particularly the pamphlet, and nobody reads the pamphlets, but they're available at most local meeting houses in a big rack, and you can just go over and take one off the wall, or you can just download it off the AA website. Go to aa.org, and you can get that little PDF right to your computer. But there's one called Medication in the AA Member. And what Bill goes to great lengths in there to say is we are not doctors, period. I want to repeat, we are not doctors, period. But we do that in the program. We will try to put ourselves in a position of authority that we know what's right or wrong for another person. Now, if somebody's using substances that are addictive, it's okay to show concern. It's okay to express your opinion and say, I don't know, man, that might get you in trouble. But ultimately, everybody has their own path and their own process, and they have to choose for themselves, and don't let it wreck your serenity or wreck your sobriety to watch it happen with others. There is a huge world of difference between using psych meds, which are specifically meant to help a person's brain operate better, than there is from using a mood-altering substance. And I always say to my patients, don't be dumb. We know what mood-altering substances are. We're the experts, okay? It's not Tylenol. Nobody's ever going to snort 10 Tylenols up their nose to try and get a high, okay? It's not going to change your mood. You might feel goofy, but you're not going to feel better. So psych substances are very misunderstood. Like, for instance, antidepressants. They're called SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. I know that sounds fancy, but what that means is in your brain, you've got all these fibers that are connected by synapses because there's gaps in the fibers. And the only way your brain can communicate with one part with another is to send the neurotransmitter through the synapse. And so when it gets to the synapse and it shoots across, some of those neurotransmitters might be carrying things like dopamine. They might be carrying serotonin. These are chemicals and hormones your body needs to just feel good, to just feel okay, to operate properly, okay? But in people who have real clinical depression, and I repeat, real, there's a world of difference between I'm situationally depressed because of my job or my girlfriend broke up, or you really have a brain disorder that needs assistance, okay? And in a person who's clinically depressed, what happens is the neurotransmitter carrying serotonin reaches that synapse, and when it gets shot across the way, it gets uptaken by the next synapse too quickly. And since it's taken up too quickly, the serotonin is not felt by the person. The dopamine is not felt by the person. So they're going to naturally feel down. Their level of mood is going to be lower, okay? Because they didn't get the hit from their natural chemicals. That's why they're called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. What they do is they shut that synapse down just for a half second. Well, really milliseconds. It's faster than you can blink. And it'll cause that ability for the chemical to be in there normally the way it should be, and then it gets taken up. That is not a drug that's changing your mood. That is a assistance to the body to help the brain operate the way it's supposed to. And that's a world of difference from a drug. Now, in the case of ADHD, we are talking about Ritalin and
Adderall.
Adderall, yeah. I could forget it. And these are, to use my old sponsors, who was a doctor, Dr. Burns Brady used to say, it's legalized prescribed meth. It is. It's speed, and it can be very problematic. Now, in my personal experience, when I get people in group with that, I ask them to see if we can go off it for a while and see how they do. And if they start having real affect, I will see them struggling in group, and I can see the ADHD, and I can see the validation that, oh yeah, you're having issues. I can tell. Rather than just me telling me they're having issues, I want to be able to see some of that effect. The other thing that happens with ADHD people is if they take their medication correctly, it helps chill them out. They do not get hyper. And that would not happen to me or Dan, I don't think. If we took meth, we'd be like, this podcast would be on fast forward. So that's a big warning sign. If you watch somebody and they're getting an effect off it, then maybe they're taking it for the wrong reasons, and they may not really have ADD, ADHD. Again, it's a personal diagnosis. You need to work with doctors. You need to work with doctors if you're in recovery that know about addiction. I will tell you that's not many of them. I don't know what they're doing today, but I've heard people say in the past that doctors got 1 hour of addiction in their entire training. And I think most of us can believe that when we look at the oxycodone. What happened there, right? Oxycontin, I mean. So talk to your sponsor in your sports. Hopefully your sponsor has a level head. He's not playing doctor and telling you what to do or not do. I do take issue with people that are going to smoke pot and say they're sober because they're getting a mood change from that. The core of our disease, as far as I understand it, is I'm not okay sober. Why am I not okay sober? Because my internal chemistry was made different than my mom's, than my brother's. They feel fine. They don't have to have a drink at breakfast. They feel like they're just living life and everything seems normal and okay. I don't feel that way. I'm in a heightened state of anxiety, depression, freaking out, misery, looking around, what's happening, and it's subdued. You will never see it, but it's in there. It's that big God hole we have inside, and we're just different that way. So if you give me a mood-altering chemical, I'm probably going to run into trouble with it because I don't know where that line is, where enough is enough. I developed that phenomenon of craving, and I want more. So you sometimes have to let people make a mistake. Let them go out on a limb. I will tell you that we had a good friend of ours that Dan might talk about that he sponsors who went through this challenge, and he did everything correct. He called me, he called Dan, he talked to his doctor, he tried different things. He was willing to be open-minded and experiment, and eventually it worked out. So, but if a person has a dead set, no, I'm smoking pot, it's like, well, you'll have to set your own sobriety date, but I don't agree with that. It's okay. California sober, man. And if anybody's doing that, don't worry about it. Watch the record play out. They'll tell you how great it is. They'll tell you how good everything is. Oh, it's working for me, man. All right, let's watch you at 5 years, 10 years. Let's let the record play out. And invariably what happens with us, if you're a true alcoholic, you go back to your drug of choice. Want to know why that is? And I'll shut up, let Dan jump in here. It's because you're scratching that itch when it wants the full salami. Anybody try to have a little sex when you're horny? Just a little bit. You ever try that? Just have a little bit. It don't work. You're going to go for the full banana. Because we want our original drug. That's what our body wants, is the thing that I crave the most. And if I'm going to tease that tiger, it's going to jump out of the cage and get it. So anything you want to add to that, Dan, about the prescribed meds and why that's an issue in the program for people?
Well, it's certainly a regular issue, and some people, I fall back to that thing. I'm not a doctor, but I think there's right ways in recovery to do it. And our friend we talked about a minute ago is getting along with it. He stays open about it. He talks to me about it. It's on the agenda regularly.
He doesn't look high. Every time I see him, he doesn't look high.
Nope, he doesn't. It doesn't seem to be having any effect on him, for that I can see. But he talks about that. It is helping him in his day-to-day. And he's worried. He had all those concerns. He was afraid it would scratch his itch and maybe run off with him too. And I think between your advice and my advice, he's doing it the right way. So then you get into it's kind of funny how the SSRIs are kind of put in one category, but because you generally don't abuse them, right?
No, I never
like
seen
the
that.
Adderalls and that kind of stuff is super abused. And it's kind of funny that I don't know. So then you go, okay, well, what if it's Suboxone prescribed? Because now it's a prescription drug, right? Just like anything else, and Absolutely. It is a harm management thing. And And frankly, I haven't had anybody who had to try to. I have not attempted to sponsor anybody that was on that. Just gets it gets a little sticky across the board, and well, I guess as long as the person's staying open about it and all that, and it's doing it successfully and it's working for them, who am I to say what they should or shouldn't be taking?
Well, there's treatment groups that don't understand about therapies that have to be used to get people off heavier drugs. It's the reality of what we have to deal with in the war zone today, and I've really altered my stance over time to look at the evidence and see what works and what doesn't. And Suboxone and methadone and Vivitrol for alcoholics, these are tools. And that's why I explain to my patient, it's another tool in your toolkit. It's not the only tool. You got to do recovery. You got to go to your meetings. You got to do this. And if I'm going to sponsor you, I'm going to ask you we're going to create a plan to get off it. Because I will tell you straight up, anybody that's on Suboxone a year is addicted to it, and their doctor should be sued for malpractice. It was never meant for long-term use. I'll argue that with any professional that's out there, but I'm telling you, you're just making an addict sicker.
What do you think?
Not give them another chemical long-term. It's a short-term bridge, and I get that directly from Dr. Burns Brady. Not my opinion. Dr. Burns Brady would say that. It's just, he would call it methadone light. That's what Suboxone was, methadone light. Yeah. And but by the way, they're abusing it on the streets.
Yeah,
people are abusing Suboxone. So how could it be good long term?
Yeah, yeah. What do you think? What would be a normal? Like, what would you see as far as the duration that somebody would be on Suboxone?
3 months, three to 6 months.
Okay.
Yeah. Combined with treatment, there was really no reason at 3 to 6 months. If you've done the work with your sponsor, you should be getting relief.
Yeah.
And you should be over the detox period. That's an excuse to say, oh, I'm still detox. No, you're not. And what you're doing is having dry experiences now. You're not doing the tools. That's what you're suffering from. Yeah. You're not suffering from detox anymore, sir. The opioids are out of your system. Again, case by case, and we could make a whole podcast out of that. Maybe we do it later on. But it's a great question. And most of all, as a fellow member of the groups, try to stay out of the business of judgment if you want to be a good member. Just be supportive. Say, I love you no matter what. It's not my sobriety, so it doesn't affect me either way what you do. But if you feel concerned enough, speak up, because we do need people to intervene in our path when our disease is starting to fool with our thinking.
Yeah. We're
not thinking straight. Because we do have some people in our group that, probably need some talking to about some of their use. And one last thing I'll say about it, but I really need to reserve it for a full episode, is chronic pain is the number one relapse trigger that we're dealing with in professional treatment nowadays. We talk about all these other co-occurring disorders, but we're not talking enough about chronic pain issues. And I've gotten to a place of real compassion because I've had my own pain issues with things. And it wears you down to a point that you'll do anything. We had a fellow in our town who had tinnitus to a point, and he was an extremely multi-millionaire successful businessman, owned a chain of restaurants, and he blew his brains out because of that chronic situation. So we don't want that to happen. And so I'm a lot more lenient and compassionate that we got to give these people relief. But we also got to be careful that if you're a true addict, if you're using opioids and opiates, and all of a sudden you find yourself on the street in Tent City because now you're seeking them on the streets and you've been kicked out of your house, that's not good either. So there has to be some middle ground that we can reach, and that's what I try to strive for. So, but I love the question, and I love that you care. And if a guy wants to get up and say that's his sobriety date, it's not my inventory. Right, Dan?
Yep.
Stay out of the business of taking other people's inventory. Business. All right, last question for today. My question today is when dealing with, this is right on topic, guys, so here we go. Early childhood trauma. When you're dealing with early childhood trauma, all you seem to remember was the bad times when there were also good times. Why is it so hard to remember the good, and why do we focus on the bad so much? I know that's kind of complicated, not really, but not sure how else to put it. Thanks for any insights. Appreciate that exclamation point. trauma will block out good memories. So trauma will overwhelm the whole system. Remember, the deal about trauma is that it's a body experience. This is the breakthrough we've had in the past 15, 20 years, is that the body reacts before the brain does. So if your body is in distress, you will go into that fight or flight mode, which will overwhelm your ability to think or remember anything else. You talk about cops who get in tunnel vision when they're in a high-speed chase, or you talk about soldiers in battle and they only remember fragments of a PTSD episode. I remember one soldier said the trigger for him was the chicken ran across the room. And I was like, that was it? I mean, he described a horrific scene, but it was the chicken is what he remembered. Isn't that weird? But the brain's overwhelmed because the body's sending signals, danger. So it's just like in caveman days when you're like, dinosaur. Nothing else matters at that point, bro. Hit your ass. Run. So that's part of it, is obscuring that. I do think there's value in what you're asking here, though, because I think there's some work that we could be doing as a sponsor in our 4-step to help our guy remember and to encourage him to think that there were good times. It's similar to the question I asked earlier about, despite all the bad teachers you had in that other episode on teachers, there had to be an angel somewhere, somebody that gave you something good, somebody that was there for you, supportive in some way. And so I think that's helpful to balance out with your guy and say, yeah, I hear all that bad stuff, but was there a good memory too? Do you have especially when you're getting to the 8th and 9th step and you're looking at healing your stuff with your dad and forgiveness and making your amends, guess what? Remembering that there were actually some good things they did is a real strong key to forgiveness. It really is. Like, I can make a list of 20 things or more, obviously, that my dad did wrong. And then I can say, yeah, but you know what? He did this. So let's say one memory I had recently, and you get so many of them you forget, but my dad was in Philadelphia, I think, and I was in New York going to school, and he ended up coming to the Jersey Shore where the casinos are. And he said, come on down, man. Well, I'll pay for your ticket, and come on down, and we'll see Sammy Davis Jr. in concert. This is like in the 80s, and early 80s, actually. And I was like, what do I care about seeing Sammy Davis Jr.? I mean, I knew him from TV, but I got to tell you, it was one of the most amazing, one of the most talented people I've ever seen in my life. The dude dances, sings, tells jokes, talks to the audience. He was amazing. It was an amazing show. And I'm just this 19-year-old kid going, I love Sammy Davis Jr. But I had that bonding experience with my dad over that. My brother had bonding experiences over ball games. I never got that with my dad. For whatever reason, it never worked out. So there has to be some good memories to balance out the bad. But again, when you're saying, why is it so hard? It's just because trauma is the elephant in the room. It's sitting right on you. So I'm sitting right there. I'm not thinking about the small stuff. I'm like, get this elephant off me. Dan, what do you think about that concept about encouraging our guy to think about some good memories, especially when they can't forgive and they don't want to make amends with somebody? Try to find some good that they had with that person.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I haven't really thought of doing that. You get a lot of the bad, and people will bring it up, but like to redirect, right? A reframe or whatever.
Reframe.
Saying,
yes.
Instead of thinking on and obsessing on this thing that wasn't good, let me swap that thought to the thing that was good.
Mm-hmm. And again, it won't be the salve for the whole wound.
Right, yeah.
But it will soften it little bit.
Yep.
A little bit.
Ease it some anyway, and start, that can start moving it in that direction rather than being stuck in this direction or even moving in getting worse.
See, that feeds into when we were talking about the inner child being activated and it's not thinking straight.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we call that in therapy errors in thinking. Addicts and alcoholics have this all or nothing thinking. It was all bad. It was all bad. It was all... Wait a minute, dude. You had a full lifetime. It was many years you were a kid. Tell me there had to be one moment where you got an ice cream cone or something good happened.
Yeah.
But they want to insist it was all bad. It's like, no, that's an error in thinking. Reframe that.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, great question again. And I'm wondering whether or not you have some inner child, some trauma stuff that maybe you're thinking about. And if you want to send us a question about that, I don't know why I just picked up on that, but you said when dealing with early childhood trauma. Tell us more. If you want to throw in another anonymous question down the road, we'd be happy to try to address it if it'll help you on your journey. All right, folks. Well, we're going to wrap up this episode for you. We don't beg you to do this very much. We're not going to hit you with all these like, subscribe stuff, but anything you can do to help us emerge our profile so that people can find us. I had a patient today saying, what do I need to put in to find the podcast? And I had to explain, put in the podcast, put in the word I want to, put in podcast, then put in my name. And he had my last name spelled wrong, so he thinks that's what was going wrong. But that's how buried we are. Nobody's listening to this. Nobody's getting these tools. So please, anything you can do, like, subscribe, comment, that will help us get more YouTube views and be able to spread this to others. And one other thing Dan likes to say about adding it to your Facebook page. You want to say something about that?
Post
Dan?
it on your share. That's the share part. That is what, at some level, in today's world, it's rarely like I'm going to share it with my buddy. One huge way to share is post it on your social media accounts. Just put the link on there.
Just say like currently listening to, or this was a good show, or whatever.
Yep. I mean, it's kind of implied that if you're sharing it with people, that you got some benefit from it, and you're trying to share it with other people. I mean, it's kind of that is what we're doing, and I'm seeing people doing it, and really do appreciate those out there that are doing it. See, people are sharing it, and particularly a few people are doing a good job on sharing the episode. So
hell yeah. And you know what's going to happen is Dan and I are going to keep plugging away here and just keep doing these things, because we are doing this for free, and we are doing this to pay back what was given to us, and we want everybody to have these tools. So I just know that God's going to take care of the rest, and we'll blow up, and people will get it when they need it. So I sometimes feel, we'll end on this, as if, the world's in a tough space. We're all feeling like dark times are ahead. People's moods are gloomy. And I feel like maybe we're laying the groundwork for tools that people will need, when the shit hits the fan, and people are going to be looking, because we usually don't look for tools till we're in pain.
Yep.
So,
and these tools are grossly underestimated.
Change your whole damn life. No doubt about it. Had a patient today say, I'm happier than I've ever been. And he has his 1 year coming up in December. I'm happier than I've ever been. I made sure my patients heard that. All right. Well, thanks for being with us. We love you to death. We can't do this without your support, and we're going to keep trugging. So keep tuning in every Wednesday morning. We'll have them posted for you, provided we don't something else doesn't happen. The creek don't rise, as we say. All right. We like to close with the Serenity Prayer. So if you'd like to join us at home, it's a great prayer to say to center yourself. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and wisdom to know the difference. Just for today, keep coming back. It works if you work it, and you die if you don't. Woo-hoo-hoo! Thanks for being with us. We'll see you next time. We love you.